The great Carl Sagan was always being approached by people who claimed to have been abducted by aliens. And he made a rather telling point that if he were ever abducted by an alien, he would immediately, since they obviously are brilliant mathematicians and physicists, or they couldn't possibly have got here in their spaceships, he would ask them scientific questions, or he'd ask them, please prove Fermat's last theorem or the Goldbach conjecture. But not a bit of it. The only thing the aliens ever talk about is things like, we must be good to each other, and things like that, which is totally unoriginal. And it occurred to me that if I were to listen to a medium calling spirits of the dead, wouldn't you, I mean, if you're talking to a dead person via a medium, wouldn't you ask them things like, well, what's it like being dead? Do you eat? Do you sleep? Do you sort of have parties? Do you, what's God like? All those sorts of questions. But it's never that. It's, oh, well, tell him I miss him. The dog misses him. It's always so incredibly banal and unimaginative.
And also, they tend not to go anywhere either. I mean, when you listen to the demonstrations in a spiritualist church, it really is just about what they believe they're doing is supplying proof. So they're telling you that you've got a box of old photographs in a cupboard, and that you have got a scar on your left knee from something when you were young, or that you had this or that accident, and telling you these things to just sort of constantly supply proof. They never really go anywhere. There's never any sort of real advice involved, which maybe in a way is a saving grace, that you're not telling people to go away and behave in a certain way, but I don't think excuse it at any level. But yes, it is mind-numbingly banal. And also, you'd think if they really were able to give all this information, they'd at least be able to sort of say their names clearly, as opposed to just sort of giving letters here and there, or being vague about whether the name refers to themselves or the person in the. It's just talking about the illogicality behind so many of these systems, and tarot cards, which are obviously very, very popular. The deck is mixed, and you choose a number of cards that's sort of laid out, and then your fortune and fate is read from them. Of course, the interesting conundrum there is that if you did the same thing 5 minutes later, you'd pick out very different cards. So presumably your fate and the reading would be necessarily very different. If it's relying on those cards, 5 minutes later it would be completely different. And when there've been questions about this, the answer is, oh, well, that's because your fate changes from minute to minute. But then you have to think, well, so presumably to get a tarot reading, you'd have to constantly be having a tarot reading over and over again in order to know what the accurate situation is, if it constantly changes from minute to minute. Does that make any sense?
I thought they claimed that the act of shuffling was somehow guided by the spirits, so that the right 5 cards come to the top of the pack.
That's true, but the right 5 cards, if I'm a tarot reader and we shuffle and the 5 cards come out, and those are the 5 cards that dictate your fate, that's great. And if you went away at that point, that's fine. I've told you your fate, and I've told you everything about yourself and your past, present, and future.
But if
you said let's do it again, if you said great, can we just do that one more time? Would you not expect the same cards to come out because it's fixed?
It's a good question.
And if there are other ones, then wouldn't we, but they say, well, it's because your fate constantly changes. Each time you deal the cards out, your fate changes from minute to minute. So the only answer for you is you'd have to consistently go back.
Yes.
When would you stop? When would you have the correct one? I don't understand that at all.
Yes. One of the psychics that did tarot cards for me shuffled the cards. Did she shuffle them? I can't remember whether I shuffled them or whether she shuffled them. But I asked the question, but how do the spirits actually influence the position of the cards? And that was the point where she gave up. It was a different one. She gave up at that point because I was being...
You're blocking the energy,
I was being too inquisitive. I was being too sceptical. And so that brought the thing to a halt.
I had the same thing with the palmist. She started talking about it, and I was trying to be interested, and I sort of was interested. I'd never had it done before. And I said, so what is the link between your personality and your future and so on? What's the theory behind how that actually gets into the hand? I thought that would be an interesting answer. Same thing, blocking the energy, end of session. Yeah, I think from psychics to spiritualists to palm readers to graphologists to astrologists, the expert in question is either just simply deluded and naive, or they're using a skill called cold reading, which is a way of communicating information to somebody where it sounds like they know everything about you and they can reveal facts seemingly about your life and describe your character in a way that you'd be amazed by. Whereas in fact it's a linguistic trick, or a set of linguistic tricks, where they're saying words and you're constantly supplying the meaning yourself, but it can be very convincing. Barnum statements are part of the toolkit of the cold reading psychic, named after the showman P.T. Barnum, who famously said that he had something for everyone, and they are statements which apply to everyone, although they'll always sound very specific to the individual. You know, pretty much everybody's had some creative pursuit at some point that they've left behind them, and if I point that out to you, you know, it might sound very insightful, but really it could just apply to anybody.
It would certainly work for me.
Me too. Hey.
Do you think that people are ever actually positively damaged psychologically by attending seances with mediums?
I think there are certainly rare cases, maybe not that rare, of people who get quite addicted to it. You know, if you've lost someone that's very dear to you, it's an ugly situation where if you get addicted to a charlatan or a number of charlatans on stage, if you go to every medium show you can because you want to reconnect with someone you've lost, I think that's damaging. I think I remember reading. This was told to me by a friend of a woman who'd been to a rally given by Doris Stokes, who was a famous medium a little while ago. And what Stokes' people would do is they'd go to a new town and they'd have any number of letters coming in from people desperately wanting Doris to get in touch with someone they'd lost. So Stokes is turning up she's got all the information, she doesn't have to really do any cold reading at all. It's called hot reading. It's known as when you know the information up front. But what they'd also do is they'll go through the papers and find any stories of accidents or where people have been lost. And this woman got a phone call from Stokes' people saying, we know that you've... Doris has... she's got a message for your son. You've lost a son in an accident, is that right? She said, yes, it had been in the papers. It was quite a well-publicised thing. Well, she'd like to give you a message from her son, from your son, so would you come to the rally? And this woman, well, she can't just give me this message on the phone. Well, no, she'd really like you to come to the rally where the spirits are. Okay, so this woman turns up, and they also said to her on the phone, would you wear like a red top or just something so she knows to identify you, so she knows where you are? We've got you a really nice seat near the front. So this woman turned up, a bit sort of bemused by the whole thing, but thinking, okay. And during the show, after Stokes had a few misses, and needed to lift it a bit, she said, there's a lady over there in the red jumper over there, and there's a lovely lad coming through to me now. He said he died and he was your son. It was a drowning, wasn't it? Is that right, my love? Is that right? Yes. She's going, yes. Oh, she stands her up. Yes, that's right. Oh, he's just saying, it was terrible, but he loves you, and you're not to feel bad about it. You're not to blame yourself. And then goes over there. And the audience are amazed because it looks like she's just been able to... But this woman felt so violated. Mm. It was such a transparently...
Why didn't she blow
vile...
the whistle? Why didn't she spill the beans?
Because she's in front of... 2,000 or 3,000 people that have attended it. And it's confusing. It's one of those things that at the time I think it's just confusing. It's like, okay, where's this going to go? Oh, is that it? All right. And maybe it's only afterwards, maybe, that you kind of think...
But she could have written a letter to the local paper or something.
I don't know. I don't know what she did, as it was a friend of hers that told me the story. But I think there's no doubt that for a lot of people, because it really isn't always that convincing, it can be very ugly.
Actually, even if she had blown the whistle, I've just remembered a story of James Randi about how he unmasked a psychic who was using he had a earpiece,
right?
And he had somebody talking to him by radio, who was feeding him information that he was getting from the back of the room. Mm. And Randy actually got an engineer to intercept the radio frequency, and so he actually had a film which was shown on national television in America of this bogus psychic. Calling spirits out and saying, I'm getting so-and-so, and getting uncannily accurate information. And all the time, the television audience was hearing the prompting voice that was going into the earpiece. They were hearing it.
I see, right, yes.
The man should have been completely destroyed. And what happened, he went on with his career as if nothing had happened. It's as though people just don't want to know. They don't want these people to be unmasked. And if they are unmasked, it's almost as though they just go into denial and cut it out. Or maybe there are enough people out there who just hadn't seen that television show and so didn't know that he'd been unmasked. But that particular charlatan to this day, according to Randy, is doing a brisk trade despite an unmasking which could not have been more devastating you would have thought.
I think psychics are going to be no strangers. Yeah, sorry. No, go on.